As if you're not audible.
Yeah, actually, there is. Okay. Hey everyone, thanks for joining today. We are Azure Singapore community group, and this is a part of Microsoft Technical Singapore community, and we are part of Microsoft Tech group. There are other communities as well. There are AI community, .NET communities, and so if you are interested in any of the sessions related to other communities, you can join our Facebook group, MS Technical Communities, and all our sessions, upcoming sessions will be announced there. And we have also a meetup group, so you can join the meetup sessions there, and all our upcoming sessions will be announced there. We have also a YouTube group, so all our session recordings are available there. If you are interested to speak and any of the session, you can contact one of us. Okay, and today is actually we have done some past sessions in previously, so all our session recordings are available on our YouTube channel. And today we had two sessions, but unfortunately, first speaker, which is Ryan O'Connell, he had some issue with at home. Someone death happened suddenly, so I think he will not be able to make it today. But we have another sessions, FinOps on Microsoft Azure by Martyn. I will check Martyn if he can present 7 o'clock. Okay, and because just now Ryan confirmed that he will not be able to make it. So Martyn, you there? If not, then we'll start by 8 o'clock with Martyn. Let me check with Martyn first. Apologize for inconvenience. Yeah, I think this is just sudden. He just make it. Okay. Oh shit. I think I was on mute. Oh, sorry guys. Sorry guys, I think I was on mute. I was just talking and sorry. Unfortunately, there is one session which is cancelled today by Rayan because of he having some, unfortunately there is some death in his family, so he will not be able to make it. Martyn will be joining in a couple of minutes. So that session is going to be very interesting because he will explain how you can manage your cost on while deploying the Azure resources on Microsoft Azure. About Martyn, he is head of DevOps at Transparity, and it's a UK managed firm. Basically, in his workplace, they works on deploying the DevOps with the organizations and also some Azure resources. And he is also Microsoft MVP and Microsoft certified trainer. And he is also a DevOps Ambassador for Azure DevOps Institute. So if you want to follow Martyn, there is his a blog, and you can follow his GitHub, and you can also follow him on the LinkedIn. He's quite active on LinkedIn and Twitter both. And this is a session which is going to happen on 5th of August. So if you are interested to know for Azure admin, what are the qualities you must have, or this session is Wim will explain about what are the best features and what are the qualities you should have for being a Azure admin. So you can join the session, and the second session is more on Kubernetes service and Azure ML deployment. So if you are interested in both of the topics, you can join on 5th of August. Azure ML will be done by Ambrish Ganguly. He is a senior consultant at TCS, and he is also one of the open source contributor on NASA projects, and he having a really good experience in data science projects. So that session might be very interesting for you. And we have also done some past sessions, and but today's session was quite unique, both of them actually. But unfortunately, there will be one of them will not be happen. So we'll try to catch up with Ryan in maybe in upcoming meetups. But FinOps is one of the unique session which we have done in past, so that might be very interesting for you. And if you are interested in data sessions, so 2 sessions are happening on 29th of July, which is data migration using Azure Data Factory and Azure SQL database for the DBAs. And this is our MVP YouTube group. So if you are interested in on some previous sessions which we have done in past, you can take a look. And there are really nice sessions we have done in past by John Saville, Tim Warner, and some of the other well-known speakers. So yeah, that will be really helpful. And yeah, we have done also some Chartburst sessions, so that's available on our YouTube channel. And there are a few reminders. Please keep yourself on mute during the session. This session is being recorded. And if you like the session, please spread the word on social media. And if you have any questions, so you can raise your raise hand feature, or yeah, I think Martyn is also online. Hey Martyn, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, thanks.
For joining. Yeah,
no worries.
Sudden some change in the schedule because of Ryan could not make it. He having some unfortunate family issues, and that there was.
Yep, that's okay.
I was just going through. Maybe you can try to share your screen and check if it's okay.
I'll just put the slides up first, and I can switch to the demo later on. All right, there we go.
Yeah, guys, as I earlier mentioned, Martyn is head of the DevOps Transparity, a UK managed firm, and he basically deals with is responsible for cloud management products and development of the DevOps in his organization. And he is also a Microsoft MVP and MCT, and he's a well-known speaker, and he's ambassador for DevOps Institute, and he also manage SharePoint Europe group organizer. So yeah, what do you, Martyn?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So actually this talk I'm going to do was something that I did at SharePoint Europe. I don't organize it. It's quite a big event. It's certainly well above my level of expertise. But so yeah, I just forgot to take it off. But thanks for the intro. Pretty much taking everything off that slide anyway, so I'll skip by it pretty quickly. Just a couple of I guess bits to fill in. So my background is traditionally all around development. So the past few years I've been doing quite a lot of cloud native development. So moving away from your traditional VM services and obviously using things like Cosmos DB, app services, containers, insert another PaaS service. So that's what I've been doing, excuse me, recently, work-wise. I also blog quite a bit as well. Now, one good thing, so I have a book that came out on DevOps adoption strategies a couple of weeks ago now. So I want to give away a PDF copy of the book. So if you're interested, just drop a message into the chat. Just says count me in or something like that, and at the end we'll get Nilesh or one of the other organisers to pick a winner, and then can take your email address, and I'll get the publisher to send over a PDF copy of it for you. If you would like to buy the book as well, if you just scan the QR code that's up there, you can go over to Amazon and buy it off Amazon as well as direct through the publisher. But there's a few different options there. If you do read it, please feel free to give us a review. Excuse me, reviews always help drive more people to go buy the book as well. So once we get to the end of the demo, we'll just ask the guys to pick someone from those people that are interested, and one of you will be the lucky recipient of a PDF copy of the book. Okay, so let's get started. I'll put that link up at the end again if anyone hasn't got it. So I just want to start by talking a little bit around what exactly is FinOps. We've all heard of DevOps, we've all heard of DataOps, GitOps, AIOps. That whole something ops is called XOps. That's the coverall term for it, and FinOps is another one of those, really. So at its core, FinOps is really a cultural practice, a lot like DevOps is. And it's the way for teams to be able to manage their cloud costs, where everyone takes ownership of the cloud usage, supported by essential best practices group. So there's a lot of alignment to DevOps there in kind of what it does. From a cross-functional perspective, teams in IT, finance, product, and the rest of the business, they work together to enable the faster product delivery, while at the same time gaining more financial control and predictability. So the cloud, as I'm sure you'll all agree, is great. Excuse me, but one of the challenges it does present us is that the costs are never fixed. Right? Even if you have the same resources running 24/7, 365 days a year, month to month, those costs will fluctuate due to currency variations, the number of hours in a month that are billable, various other changes that take place, especially if your resources are billed based on compute power that they consume. So the costs are very variable, and that presents a problem for a lot of finance organizations that obviously like predictability. Finance and business like predictability. They don't like uncertainty. So it created a bit of a headache, and so FinOps came along really to address some of those things and really help with taking the unpredictability out of the scenario. So what are the principles of FinOps? Okay, so it's really down to 6 core things, really. So it's the ability for teams need to collaborate. So one of the core principles, just like in DevOps, is it's all about collaboration. And it's really key that those teams collaborate well together to make sure that they have an understanding of what each other's responsible for, what each other or what each of those teams actually do in terms of managing the cloud platform. It's also important as well that business value of the cloud drives any decisions that you make in FinOps. So this is where we start to deviate out of DevOps a little bit in some of the traditional pieces, but we still talk about value. But when it comes to FinOps, it should be the business value of what the cloud provides your organization that drives those decisions. And that's something that's really, really important to think about, and something that's really important to do as you go forward. So that's a key thing to take into account when you're looking at making decisions. Next one is that everyone takes ownership for their cloud usage. So we've kind of fallen into bad ways with a data center in a lot of ways, that when we work in the data center, we're obviously very much focused on what is happening day to day. And after we've done that day to day, we're very focused on having a look at exactly what we would work on, what we would build, what we would deploy. And when we've done that deployment, that's when we get into a position, unfortunately, that we are not able to drive forward with more detail what we do, because we're scared of the cost. Right now, everything is billable, whereas before in non-cloud environments, you could deploy pretty much whatever you wanted without many people really, I wouldn't say taking notice, but without many people really realizing exactly what it was that you were working on, or what the cost of that was, because it was internal cost that was never seen. But the cloud is different. The cloud is very different. And one of the reasons that the cloud is very different is because every action that you take ultimately has a cost at the end of it, and it's that cost that people get worried about and people get scared about. So it's important to realize that attributed to those costs are things that we need to be conscious of. Deploying very large virtual machines, for instance, can consume costs really quickly, but it can be even down to something really simple, and that's something that's really simple could be storage costs. Like over time, storage costs can get larger and larger, and they can soon add up. And it's those things that we need to be careful of in these environments, and it's these things that we need to be conscious of when it comes to how we develop and how we manage our cloud environments. Excuse me. Next one is around reporting, and it says that FinOps reports should be accessible and timely. So this is where automation comes in. Automation is going to help you deliver the same report time and time again, and a platform to access them. It could be Power BI, and makes them accessible to the people that need them as quickly and as instantly as they need them. They don't need to go ask people for those reports or ask people for those reports to be run. There's lots of different things that are responsible. Lots of different things that are ultimately really important when it comes to making sure that we look at those sorts of things. So making sure your reports are both accessible and timely, and by timely we mean delivered at the same time every month. That's what automation helps. Next one is around a centralized team driving FinOps. Now what we mean by that is a group of people that are responsible for both the ability, responsible for the ability to set standards and enforce those standards. So it's okay setting standards, but if there's no one there to enforce those standards, it's actually really difficult to do anything with that, really, because when you set those standards and when those standards are not adhered to, you're not really in a great position. A lot of organizations that you'll see around many things in the cloud around governance will say, yeah, we have standards, but when you actually dive into it, they don't actually have tangible standards that mean that they are adhering to what they've set themselves. You know, it's almost like the Wild West scenario, is that there are some rules, but those rules are not adhered to and people do what they want. Next one is around taking advantage of the variable cost model that comes with a cloud. So being able to shut down resources when they're not needed, resize resources when they're over provisioned, or resize them up when they're under provisioned. Sometimes there are cost benefits from moving upwards, excuse me, and making sure that you have the ability there to be able to go into and exploit some of those variable cost benefits. So variable costs, as much as it's created a problem, does actually have some benefits as well. And it's really important to make sure that you are aware of what those differences are, and make sure that you are aware of how to exploit those costs. So in terms of key stakeholders that are involved, so there's really 4 areas. So from an exec level, you would be looking at either VPs or heads of infrastructure and operations being involved in your FinOps scenarios and your FinOps teams, as well as the CTO and the CIO. Ultimately, they hold the budgets generally, as well as VPs and heads of. From a product perspective, your cloud analysts, your business operations folks, and the director of cloud, the leader of the cloud division, are really the 2 that are important when it comes to having product owner responsibility, because they understand what's happening from a product perspective and can feed into some of the things that we're going to look at shortly. Finance goes without saying, people that are responsible for sourcing, procurement, business planning from a financial perspective. You know, it's quite an obvious thing. If we're talking about finance, we need some finance representation within there to be able to help us look at what's good and what's not good, and help build models. Financial models are very complicated, but they're also very powerful as well if they're done the right way. So it's something that's really important to think about. Okay, next from an engineering perspective. Okay, so your lead engineers that are responsible for your products, as well as the systems engineers that support, as well as the architects that design the solutions, and the management that are responsible for those engineers. Again, They're really important people to have in this conversation because they understand the technical aspect of the invocation of those costs. They understand if I deploy X, I will invoke Y cost. So it's really important to have those people in the room and in that conversation. And that is something that I would, highly advocate and make sure that people are very much aware as to what's happening. Okay, so that's the first thing, and that's a really important point, is making sure you have the right people in the room. Okay, so next one really is more around oh, I'll change the slide, is making sure you have the right architecture in place to be able to support this. And it's around three key parts of it that make up a wheel. So inform, optimize, and operate. So the first two steps around inform will give you ultimately visibility for the allocation and creating that shared accountability by showing teams what they're spending and why they're spending them. Moving into optimize, and the next couple of bits in optimize, it's around empowering teams to be able to identify and measure any efficiency optimizations and then making goals based on those opportunities. So optimization is all around opportunity, and we'll go into what that means in a minute. Operates the next one. So defines and also executes processes which enable the goals of both technology, finance, and also the business to be achieved. Ultimately, we want people to achieve their goals. That's why we're in this business. So the first step around inform, you can see on the points there, it's around understanding costs and also being able to benchmark your performance. So when we talk about understanding costs, we mean specifically in Azure, setting tags on your resources to be able to look at who's spending what based on a tagging strategy, and also creating compliance using something like Azure policy to be able to adhere to that. So we talked earlier about compliance a little bit on an earlier slide. Setting standards and enforcing. So setting standards in this scenario would be setting an appropriate tagging strategy, and enforcing it would be through Azure policy. So that's a really important thing to mention there. It's a really important thing to pick up on. There's a good example quite early up there as to how you can both set standards and enforce them fairly easily. Next thing is around making sure you define tight budgets and being able to forecast your spend. It's okay knowing how much you're spending, but knowing how much you're going to spend is a very powerful thing to be able to tell someone. So that's something that's really, really important. And that importance of understanding what you're going to spend takes some of the unpredictability out of cloud cost. So some of those variable costs are negated somewhat by having the ability to be able to forecast, and forecasting is a key part of FinOps. Around benchmarking, it's around creating scorecards, metrics, and KPIs to be able to track your spend, understand how you're performing against those scorecards, and also measure them using KPIs. And KPIs are obviously, things that will keep people on point when it comes to understanding how we're performing, and it's something easily visible to the rest of the business to be able to see how you're doing. Okay, so next is around optimize again. So around optimize, it's around making real-time decisions. So having data available to be able to find and remove underutilized services, as we've talked about. So again, things that consume cost in Azure that people might not be aware of. When you delete a virtual machine, the disks are not deleted. So they're effectively orphan disks that are consuming storage costs. That can soon add up. So being able to understand that's very important. Being able to identify any anomalies, so looking at what is not normal, and benchmarking helps that. So if you benchmark your performance, you are much easily able to identify anomalies that occur within your operating model. And then you can move forward to optimize. You can right size, you can manage the workloads, you can introduce things like automation in there, and that automation is really useful, and to be able to take some of the manual work out of managing a FinOps scenario. Next is around operate and operating, utilizing the marketplace. So a lot of people don't realize that if you put a product on top of, say, a Windows server that was your own, you might be able to, that might cost more from a licensing perspective than just buying it out in the marketplace. So always look at the licensing optimization and licensing options that are available for the applications you use by utilizing the marketplace. There are lots of third-party offerings in the marketplace where they provide applications on top as pay-as-you-go rate. So it's something that's really important. Next is around making sure that you pre-purchase capacity. So in Azure, this is reserved instances. So being able to make use of reservations where you know you have long-term commits to resource types will ultimately save you money and can save you a lot of money if you know what you are going to buy up front. Next one's around agility. So this is almost like making mini business cases and defining out your communication strategy, and also developing a decision-making framework that aligns with the business drivers, right? What are the business's goals? How are we going to help support the business's goals by what we do in FinOps and how we spend our money in cloud? And also making sure that we have ongoing reviews with stakeholders. So you can adopt a lot of what you do in Agile and DevOps around sprint methodology into FinOps as well. And you can have optimization schedules that are basically sprints. So you can have a 2-week optimization schedule or a 4-week optimization schedule. And that can really help you set specific points in time that you want to optimize how you're spending money in the cloud. Now, just before we move on, I just want to look at the question that Nilesha's put in. So for anyone that can't see anyone that can't see the slides. So it's related to slide 7. Are there any tools for benchmarking? Usually teams tend to compare on-prem performance against the cloud. So that's a really good question. So teams that are not as mature in the cloud, and what I mean by that are organizations that have moved within, let's say, a year to 18 months or so. They'll generally always compare with data on-prem. So you need to, when you benchmark in the cloud, you need to try and forget on-premises. I know that's a difficult thing to do and almost a throwaway thing to say, but it's really important that you forget how the environment runs, because they actually run completely different. So it's like comparing an apple against an orange. They're completely different things. You won't be able to do it. And that's going to generate you a problem when you start looking at the costs. If you just do a lift and shift migration to any cloud platform, not just Azure, you're likely to spend more than you would on premises because the cloud platform is there to be optimized. Once you start optimizing your resources, that's when you start saving money and bringing those costs down. So in terms of tools to help with that benchmarking, so I'm going to show you Azure Cost Management, which will help with some of that benchmarking because it monitors your costs all of the time. Excuse me. That will help you benchmark your costs today. And ultimately you can re-benchmark in a few weeks or whatever that period is, re-benchmark and see where you're at, and that the difference there will tell you how you're performing against your plan. In terms of more widely against the industry, so there's lots of research out there from people like Gartner or 451 Research that will give you industry benchmarks around how people are spending, what the average application cost is in the cloud, all kinds of different metrics. So you can use that data as well to be able to benchmark against yourselves and say, well, actually, in the financial services industry, we're in line with the industry average, or whatever it might be. There's lots of different scenarios that and may or may not pan out for you, but it's useful to have that information. So Nilesha, I don't know if that answers your question. So that in terms of tools, there's no specific tools really. It's more around data. So having the data and being able to generate your own benchmark of costs is really what we're talking about here, rather than a tool which will just go off and give you an output.
Yeah, it does answer my question. Thanks, Martyn.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so with that, let's jump into Azure Cost Management, and let's have a look at what this can bring for us. Okay, so pretty standard. Azure Cost Management is what used to be Cloudin. So if you remember, 2 to 3 years ago, I think it was, Microsoft bought Cloudin, which give you the ability to look at your cloud costs in more detail. So that got a complete overhaul, and is now just part of the native portal as cost management. So it's something that's evolved quite a bit. And like everything else, cost management has the ability to have access control defined against it, so who can and cannot see your cloud costs. But to start with, I'm going to go through some of these, and then we'll come back to the cost analysis stuff, which is of more interest. So, interesting thing, just starting at the bottom, is if you have a multi-cloud environment, you can add a connector. So if you just go onto here, you can basically add certain information in and define various different bits and pieces from your AWS environment, and go create a connector which will go get your costs from AWS, from your AWS account. One thing that's interesting to note and be aware of this is not a free service. So you get 90 days for free, but after that period, you are charged the 1% of your AWS costs. So having that connector there is free for a little bit, but then you have to pay for it. So obviously, the bigger your AWS bill, the more that's going to cost you. But that's really good in a lot of ways, because most vendors that do this will charge you in a similar way anyway. But one thing that's really good is you get all your costs in one place. So if you use Azure and you use AWS, then this is kind of a no-brainer to do, really, because it means that all of your reporting can be done in one place. And we all know how much easier it is to report when everything is in one place rather than disparate locations. Just some config options that you can look at. So by default, we'll look at management groups. And you can see the scope at the top there is set to my root management group. So no matter how many other management groups or subscriptions I have, they all filter down and they all report up to the top, which is the root. So we're basically looking at the highest level we can do. There aren't many configuration options, but it does take you to the management group settings if you want to change your management group settings and look at various other things. If you bought reservations, all your reservations will be listed in here. So this is a good place to be able to come and see all your reservations in one place rather than in a different part of the console. Likewise, you are able to see all your subscriptions. If you go into there, it basically shows you all of your separate subscriptions that report up into that management group. So all of the cost data that we're generating is basically coming from these subscriptions. Okay, so let's just go back. Okay, so payment methods, obviously depending on where you are. So for billing accounts, billing profiles, or pay-as-you-go subscriptions, you will be able to see your payment methods. We're not at a scope that supports that in management groups. They're obviously just part of the Azure construct, so that you don't get the ability to see them. And when you go to invoices, exactly the same thing. So you would have to go on to change scope, and you would have to switch down and look at specific subscriptions if you wanted to see what your invoices and your payment methods were. Now, just going up a little bit into cost analysis, you'll notice that there's two options available to you. There's the normal cost analysis, which does take a while to load due to the amount of data that it's accumulating. So we'll just wait for this to generate, and we'll talk a little bit about this. Okay, here we go. So what you can see is over everything so far this month, we have spent £1,896.63, and our forecast, which is this darker green bit, which goes all the way up to the end of the month and obviously keeps going up, is forecast to be 3,220.75. So as we roll towards the end of the month, obviously that forecast gets a bit more accurate. Is the idea. And actually, the projections that come in here with the forecast are actually pretty accurate. If you take one at the beginning of the month, and you don't actually change much in your environment, you will find that the projection that comes out at the end is pretty accurate. And if you are making a lot of changes within your environment, it can take up to 7 days for the forecast to settle down as it gets used to what is in your environment, and you will be able to see that fluctuating a little bit. If you were to check this every day or check a graph over time, you would see that it was fluctuating before settling out a little bit. So that's an interesting thing that you can see and apply on there. On the top level of the chart, you can switch, first of all, between different metrics. So you can look at the actual cost, or you can look at something that's called the amortized cost. Now, amortization in finance is a skill in itself, but amortized costs, if I switch to amortized costs, so just while that's loading, that question that's just come in, it's just disappeared. Let me get that back. So does the forecast consider services auto scale? Yes, it absolutely does. So if you have auto scaling rules on an app service or a VM as part of a scale set, for instance, then that would be considered in the forecast, especially if a scaling event does actually happen. So if it doesn't scale, obviously you're not consuming more costs, so it wouldn't be reflected here. But if you do have auto scaling events, they do reflect within the usage that you can see here as well. So yes, absolutely. So on amortized costs, so amortized costs. Basically, if you take your reservations that you've purchased, so you can pay up front for those reservations, or you can now pay monthly for those reservations. But if you pay for them up front, the cost for the actual resource is obviously zero. So an amortized cost takes the cost of that reservation and applies it evenly across all of the billing periods that reservation lives across. So if you bought a 1-year reservation, for instance, it would the amortized cost would be reflected within 12 equal months of what that reservation cost you. So, for instance, if you bought a reservation for £1,200, then at the end of the at the end, your amortized costs, your actual cost would be zero because you've already paid for it, but your amortized costs would be £100 a month. So it's basically giving you the ability to reflect what your costs are, even though you've already prepaid. And amortized costs are actually a key part of financial planning. And something that's really important to understand is you get more into FinOps and into financial reporting. If any of you are lucky enough to work with financial teams within your organizations or have done in the past, then amortization of costs is something that they will have talked about and something that will be on lots of reports that they generate. So this takes the hassle out of working out what those costs are and gives you the ability to reflect them here. So the costs here are actually exactly the same, and the reason for that is that I don't have any reservations. So there's nothing being paid up front. So the actual cost and my amortized costs are exactly the same. So there's no difference on there at all. So you can hide the forecast if you want and just show your actual costs if you want to in there. We'll come on to budgets in a minute, but you can show your budgets in here as well. You can have different types of grouping in here as well. So if you wanted to group by specific tags, you could look in here and you could look at say workload name. So you could group all of your costs on here by workload name, and that would enable you to quite quickly see what the cost of all of the resources that make up a specific workload name are. So you can see at the bottom there we have so some tags that are not available, so we can take them off. We can take off untagged resources as well. We could also take off the forecast if we want, and you can see here where the value is cloud management platform. These are the costs over the month. Interesting thing to note is you will see, in the past day, so from the previous day to now, you will generally see odd things like the cost being flat or maybe a bit lower. And that's because those costs are only updated daily, and they're updated at midnight Pacific time. So I'm not sure what time that is for you guys, but for us in the UK, that's about 10 o'clock in the morning, depending on time zones, 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning. So I guess it's like 6, 7 o'clock for you guys. Particularly, I think you're 8 hours ahead. But sometimes you do see odd things like that. So generally discount the current day and just work on the data from the previous day, and that's accurate. You can see the line's pretty steady as we're not changing that environment. If you have static environments that are not scaling and the costs are pretty consistent, you will see a pretty linear line going up through the month as you consume more cost, which is great. But you will also see, if you're changing the environment around quite a lot, you will see a bumpy line as the costs go throughout the month. So you will see sometimes it jump higher, sometimes not as high, and then it might jump up again. There's lots of different things that can happen in terms of that view. So take the granularity, take the grouping off. From a granularity perspective, we could look at our accumulated costs. We can also look at our daily costs. So you can see here that the daily costs have been, 62 a day, and then all of a sudden we've jumped up a little bit, and then we've gone back down and quite steady. So we'd expect this to be pretty similar. You can see the forecast is also on here as well. You can also change this to be monthly. So instead of viewing that as a daily figure, it will redraw that as a monthly figure as well. So only July is on here because we're just looking at one calendar month. If I was to change this to this year, for instance, then my monthly granularity would work a lot better because I'm able to see monthly what's happening. So just wait for this to redraw and you'll see exactly what I mean. Now we've expanded it to be 2021. We should have different stuff in there. So you can see January, February, March, April, May, June, July. And if you prefer line charts, you can draw that as a line. You can do it as columns, which are stacked. So you can see the difference there between monthly and forecast. Or if you just prefer tabular data, you can redraw it as a table and just look at the tabular data, which it will do in a second. It's obviously quite a big query to run. So this is the features that are available to us at the minute. So you can see there all the tabular data that's available for us there. You sometimes need to click on date to order them in the right order, but fundamentally that gives you an idea as to what you're spending there. You can also add filters at the top as well. So any one of these things you can look at and you can filter there, which is incredibly useful. And you can, obviously, I didn't show you this, you can go into here and you can look at the different date ranges. So there's lots of different things that you can look, and if one of those doesn't suit your needs, you can go in and you can define a custom date range, and you can say, I only want my costs over 3 days, or whatever that is, February 10th to March 11th. So you can go in and draw that information, and it's going to draw it as a table because we've still got table selected. Now, let's just put this back to column for a second. Now, having this data here is great, but this doesn't really enable us to do a lot of analysis with it or put it into a proper financial planning tool or anything like that. So, what else is available to us? So you can generate exports. Okay, so you can go into here and you can schedule an export. So if you go into add or create, you can create one of those different types of exports. So daily export on month-to-date costs, weekly of the last 7 days, monthly of the last month, or a one-time export. You can tell it when you want it to start and where you want to store it. So it will always store it in a storage account, and it stores it as a CSV. You can obviously then pull down that information yourself and have a look at that and see exactly what you can zoom in. If you prefer prettier information and want to use something like Power BI, then there is a Power BI connector for cost management that's native as a data source. You can just pick it from your data sources within Power BI, and you can obviously create really great visuals in Power BI off of the data that you get back. and it's a bit more interactive. You can use it live to drill into different areas and see what the level of consumption is, etc. So those exports are really important and are really, really useful. So there's also some new functionality in the preview version of the new cost analysis. So it's a little bit different. So this shows you, again, at a subscription level to start with. We're going to wait for this to load, sadly. It takes a while. So you can see what the costs are there and how they've been consumed. And you can look at resources and resource groups and reservations, but you can also expand out. So if you expand this out, you can look at some of the information that's in here, and you can see at resource group level what some of the costs are there. So there's various different things in here that you can do, and then if you drill into that in a little bit more, you can actually go to the resource group itself and see all of the information within there. So again, that's stuff that's really useful for you to be able to see. If I just go back a second, one of the things that it doesn't do, and I hope this is just new functionality that gets added, I don't know, but I like the charts that are in cost analysis. I like being able to see that information in a visual way. So personally, I quite like the ability to do that. But one of the things it does have is a really good API. So if you click on API reference, you can look at the cost management API, and you can use that cost management API to give you some information as to exactly how that works and how you need to operate. So there's lots of great information there and samples under examples, of lots of examples as to how to format your queries. And you can put that into a third-party tool or something else, and there's lots of things that you can do. But this is quite a simplistic view. I definitely much prefer cost analysis. Okay, so cost alerts. So cost alerts, obviously, we want to know when we're spending too much money. So there's a budget set up that if your actual costs are more than 80% of a budget, send me an alert. So the current cost is 84% at 423. So the actual budget here is 500. So you can see that it's gone above 400 there, so it's sending an alert out, so you can see that's an active alert. What it references under the hood, so that comes out via an email, and what comes out over the hood under the hood is budgets. So you can set budgets within here, and your budgets can apply on different periods. They can also expire as well. And you can set a monthly amount. So I'm just going to wait for this to load because you can actually see what's happening here. So you can see averages, and you can say here, so based on your forecast, it suggests the budget for you. So we could say that we want our budget to be 3,000, for instance, and you can see it draws a line on, and you can see what's happening. You can change the scope of it, and you can see exactly what's happening. And when you go forward, you can set alerts based on that. So you can say that if the forecasted is 100% of the budget, then send me an email. So that's going to let us know if we're forecasted to go over the amount that we're specifying. So again, that's quite a useful thing to have. And you can say that if the actual costs go over 80%, which is 2,400, again, useful information for us to have, because that will give us an indication that we're not forecasted to be over our budget, but we are forecasted. We are going to spend, an actual 80% of our budget. You may want to put that onto something else if you want, but there's lots of different things that you can do. You can only have one alert condition for forecasted. So if you notice it's grayed out, so you can only set one in there, but you can have lots of actuals in there. There's lots of different ones you can have as you go through. So you can go set all those as you wish. You can set email recipients, and then once you save that, the budget evaluation takes a little bit to get going. So it says a few hours from experience, generally an hour to 2 hours. you will start to see the data be evaluated, and it will start sending out any alerts that come through. So it's not a straight away thing. It does take a little bit to go in. So just looking at the question there, so can the raw billing data be queried with Custo to create aggregations that are not supported by the visual tool? So you can't. So not using Custo or the resource graph API or anything like that, but you can download the raw billing data and you can query it using the API. So that information can be queried using the query language that was on the page there, using the API directly. So you can create your own visuals out of the back of there using that data. You can create a cut of however you see that data. There's lots of different ways that might be. There's lots of different ways that might be represented. So so in a way, yes, not as you're saying using Custo you can't, but you can using raw API calls. And there's also some things you can do with PowerShell and the CLI as well. But don't forget, you can also export that data into a CSV and then add that CSV data into Power BI or some other tool. There are lots of financial planning tools that do obviously a great job with the right raw data. So if you have one of those financial planning tools and financial analysis tools, look at what data it expects, and pretty much from experience, I'd say 95% of the time I've been able to generate the exact same data that we need for that financial planning tool for it to go off and do its own thing. So we're just feeding it the raw data. And absolutely, like your points there, most of the things that actually can be queried using Custo. Is that something that's coming in the preview? Potentially, I don't know. But I would be very surprised if it stays as it is without Custo support, given everything else is moving over to that. So the last thing to look at is advisor recommendations. So a lot of people actually don't look at this and don't use it all that often, which is quite surprising in a way. So one of the things that I really like about the ability to look at this is that it's all within one pane again. So all of my advisor recommendations that tell me in this instance what virtual machine reservations I should buy to save money. It would also tell me about right sizing as well in here. There's lots of information it could give you. It will all appear in here, and what's great is you can go into these and you can have a look at them in here. You can postpone them, you can also dismiss them if you want as well. You can create alerts off the data as well. But one of the things you can do is you can go in and you can see the resources that are recommended. So the recommended quantity that it's talking about as well. So this is basically saying that if you buy 2 standard B2S reservations, you can potentially save 47% on your costs and save $502. Now, the reason it says 2, but the actual reservation, the actual VMs that are affected are 3, is the calculation is done based on uptime. So they're called flex instances, and flex basically means that you can buy for a family or you can buy for a type. And if you resize, turn it off, you're not losing out. So it's really important that you think about what type of reservations you buy if you're going to go buy reservations. That's a whole different topic, which is something that we could cover in another session potentially, but reservations are quite complicated. So if I would say my advice is that the recommendations that come up in here in reservations are 100% accurate. So if it is recommending you buy 2, but you have 3 virtual machines, don't go buy 3 because you are likely to waste one of them. So it's important to make sure that you think about that in a lot of detail when you go buy them. So yeah, making note of the recommendations, I guess, is the ultimate advice there. So question. So recommendations work for hybrid cloud environment if you use a connector. So no, they don't. AWS does have cost analysis, but not to the same detail. I know there are tools that plug into the data in cost management and give you additional recommendations. I don't know if they support AWS as well, but as far as I'm aware, they don't support cost recommendations in here. It's just what's come out of Azure Advisor. They don't link into AWS in any way. The connector is purely for pulling in the actual data to go draw the charts and make the graphs. Okay, so kind of brings us to the end. I'm just trying to get rid of a fly that's flying around, sorry. So I'm just going to go back here a second. Let's see. Yes, to resume. So I'm just gonna bring that up for anyone who wants to scan the page again. I see in the Lesher's got his hand up. I don't know if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, you guys, if you have any questions, you can ask and can win the book. So, or we have also a lucky draw. So maybe after that I will share a screen and then we can do the lucky draw.
Yeah, I have a question, Martyn.
Yeah.
If you look at the cloud adoption, I think FinOps as a practice is quite new, right? So in your experience, can you share maybe top 3 anti-patterns that you would have seen? What we saw so far was some of the best practices, but people are still adopting cloud and it's quite new to many of the organizations. So you might have come across some of the common anti-patterns, and I would like to know what are some of those things which you have seen that people are like falling prey to.
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest one is not evolving what you're doing in the cloud. So what I mean by that is the best level of optimization is ultimately moving off virtual machines. Now you can't do that for every workload, but we can do it for the majority. So one of the biggest ones I've seen is where there is no appetite to move off of those types of workloads and move towards platform as a service or SaaS, where we obviously lose the ability to manage those and get the economies of scale of an enterprise as a service built into it as well. So that's probably the biggest one. The second one I would say is if you remember, let me find the slide that it's on. So it's this one here. It's the second one. So business value. Business value of cloud drives decisions. So I'll just put the pointer there so people can see. So if you don't follow this main principle, it's obviously the second on the list. It's something that's fairly important. But if you don't look at what value cloud is providing to your business to drive decisions, you can end up making decisions for the wrong reasons. And although we are talking about cost management, that doesn't always mean you should chop cost because you want the cost to be lower. There are better ways to manage the cost. You might do something like 10 services off out of business hours and have them on higher SKUs to maintain performance during the day. So I think the second biggest one that you can fall into the trap of is not using the power and the value of the cloud to drive your decisions, and that comes back to legacy thinking. Like, oh, it's just a server in a data center. We'll just leave it. No one's using it. So making sure that you adopt the power of the cloud within your FinOps thinking is probably the second one. If there was a third one, I would say where most people fall over it's because they can't access the data. Right, and that's number 4 on this list about reports should be accessible and timely. Right, if your FinOps team or the people responsible for this are not able to give you access to the data or give you it in a timely manner, obviously cost data has a pretty short lifespan. Right, if I look at cost today, I don't want to look at that cost data in 3 days' time because it's completely irrelevant. So I want to look at it today. So making sure that data is available and timely is really important, and making sure that the data is accurate. It's no point having data that is 20-30% different month to month for no apparent reason. So you need to make sure that the reports you provide are simple yet accessible and timely and quality in terms of data. So those are probably the three biggest things. And then I would say above all, just like DevOps, if people don't collaborate, it doesn't work. So FinOps is exactly the same, and it's the point that's at the top here. If people don't collaborate, then they are unable to work in that manner. So that's probably the biggest one, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Hey guys, please type count in if you are interested in the book, and we have a lucky draw. So we are just going to. Okay, I can see the 3 names here for the book. I think Jay and
Asif, I think there is a question from Yugi.
Yugi's got a question as well. I think he's got his hand up.
Yeah. Can the raw billing data be queried? I think.
No, he's raised his hand. So Yugi, you can go ahead and ask the question.
Hi, Martyn. My question is basically to any company, any big enterprise who is using both AWS and Azure. Is it a best practice to invest in the cloud native tools to optimize FinOps, or what is your take? Should they invest on some third-party tools like NetApp is coming up with something like Spot, or VMware is coming with some additional tools? So what is your take on that? Should a company invest more on the cloud native tools for FinOps, or they should invest more on third-party tools? Which is the best approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say if you're in one provider, then try and stick to the native tools. Probably goes without saying. But if you're in multi-cloud, like you were saying, then you just named a lot of companies that are making financial planning and analysis tools for multi-cloud environments. I would also add on top of that a company called Aptio as well, who do a similar kind of thing for multi-cloud environment. That's a great tool to use, and they give you some really good reporting and really good information in there. So yeah, absolutely. If you're in a multi-cloud environment, especially in the enterprise where there's going to be reams of data coming out of both cloud platforms, then you want to go with a tool that is made for the job. Absolutely, rather than having those segregated data sources, because having them together, having that data together in one place is how people trust it. Software One. Sorry, Pirate Cloud is very good as well. And yeah, absolutely. There's lots out there, and they all do different things. So it's like everything else. Try and have it meet your scenario. Look at what your scenario is and try and figure out exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve, and pick the tool in for the scenario rather than picking the tool for the tool's sake.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we have a lucky draw. Let me just do that quickly. Is Wu you there?
Yeah, he's there.
He's there. Okay,
that's great music.
So yeah, Wu, I think maybe you can contact, or you can. I think he's there or not. I'm not sure.
Oh yes, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Cool.
So if we can just get your email address, I guess via one of the guys, then I can get that sent over to you as soon as I can.
Okay, thank you. I will share my email. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Really
Thanks,
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Martyn. A really nice session. Yeah, you guys, if you have any other further questions, so you can ask, or you can ask with Martyn on Twitter or maybe LinkedIn, or you can also maybe ask us. I will forward to Martyn. And we have next upcoming session on 5th of August. So if you haven't registered, please do. This is one of the also nice topics on 7 habits that every Azure admin must have, and Azure ML deployment using Kubernetes. So please do. We have already announced the session. And thanks, Martyn, for your really nice session and providing a time to us. And
Yeah, no problem.
See you in upcoming meetups as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks a lot everyone for attending, and yeah, I hope you found it useful. And yeah, feel free to reach out on Twitter if you've got any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Martyn.
everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.